Look at the vast forest and go and take dominion. Northward is your direction. This is Sylvia.
Welcome to Sylvia. I'm your host, Sean Bonet, here today to give you a word on some work that I'm doing in the way of psalmody and Reformation music. My thesis is aimed at a transcription project for me to create a transcriptions of the Genevan Psalter, specifically the harmonizations that Claude Udemel performed of those melodies, and offer a collection of them where it's set in SATB format, so like you might find in a hymn all in one spot, and giving special attention to how the French text sits under that music. It'll be a great resource when it comes to analyzing the sort of original early settings of these psalms to music. And as you go along in this process, you have to set the stage, the background for people who are acting in this reformational movement, like Calvin and Udemel and other composers less well known who are coming in and doing their part. And as you dig in, you start to get some story and background to the pastoral side of these individuals, especially Calvin. As I was reading, it was brought up, something that I think is well known, that Calvin is sort of taken as a bad dude, someone who's really stale, dull, and dry. He was very much a scholar. He loved his books. He loved to research and write. But then that gets taken to a point where he's described as a stale man, or someone who is all theology and no practicality. You know, some have described him as the architect of a dogmatic system, and that's it. So there's almost a lifelessness to a statement like that, or Geneva's feared tyrant, as someone who is just being radical in all of the wrong ways. But in reality, when you read him in his theological works, and when you read accounts from him, you see that he is at heart a pastor first. As he was working in Geneva, some of the most fruitful parts of his ministry was connecting with refugees from France. And he tried to position people in such a way where they would receive the scriptures for themselves, deeply enjoy it, and apply it to their lives. It's just a key idea of the Reformation, as people need to go and access the scriptures on their own, if you will, in their own vernacular language, cutting out mediaries. And what that does is provide a more emphasized perspective on how we are to see ourselves in the scripture, specifically the Psalms, knowing that it's a book for us ultimately, as it is addressed to the church at large, the church throughout all the ages. And that is really peculiar in the Psalms. When you take the Psalms of David and say, these are my Psalms, these are Psalms for me, when you read and experience the fullness of emotion and concern and circumstance represented in the Psalms, that's very one for one. There's a lot of connections to be made to those who are refugees, much like how Calvin was often operating, and he was dealing with many unfortunate political circumstances, and also the people he's ministering to. So he's trying to push the Psalms to his people in such a way that they are finding comfort and they're finding peace because the words are for them. When you unpack a little bit of his writings, he says this about music and how text is delivered through it. Among all these other things that are proper for the recreation of man and for giving him pleasure, music, if not the first, is among the most important, and we must consider it a gift from God expressly made for that purpose. And for this reason, we must all be more careful not to abuse it, for fear of defiling or contaminating it, converting it to our damnation, what is intended for our profit and salvation. If even for this reason alone, we might well be moved to restrict the use of music to make it serve only what is respectable, and never use it for unbridled emasculations of ourselves or immodest pleasure. Nor should it be shameless. So you have a sense where John Calvin is expressing both personal, intimate care that we might be comforted in hard times, but he's also being solemn and serious with it. And that's a fascinating thing that you witness in reformers in their writings, and especially in the music produced and the works written on music. There's a sense where they're taking it to a level that is very practical and accessible, something that we carry on in today. We like to emphasize the personal quality of Scripture, the sort of an individual take on it. But what often gets what's lacking is that seriousness to go with it. So the encouragement is that you would be illuminated to how practical reformers were, especially John Calvin. He's very pastoral and taking and applying the Scriptures in a way that's trying to help people and see how people can see themselves in God's story and take comfort in the way that biblical characters found comfort, which is just a beautiful way to fellowship with the saints for all the ages, if you will. And as we do so, we recognize the vehicles by which God is using to encourage and strengthen us are to be taken with care and reverence. One way we do that is digging into history and being humbled by it, and also letting the Word have full reign, and always seeking to not be swayed by cultural pressures of the day, because they're coming, and we're all fighting to not be enslaved by poor traditions or manners of life. So be on guard and take heart. Be like Calvin in the way that you seek to minister to people as the Lord continues to fill up your cup.